Hi there, I'm Tom from Cedar Studios. We're the audio team that worked with Greenheart Games on their latest project, Tavern Keeper. Tavern Keeper is a fantasy sim management game where you start off with the enticing premise of running and managing your own tavern, alongside all of the wacky characters and different locations in the world. The game's full of different gameplay systems, all the way from the usual business decisions you'd expect to cooking your own food and designing your own props. We wanted to give you a bit of a look behind the scenes of how we went about creating and implementing some of Tavern Keeper's audio systems. First, we'll focus on the dynamic world map music, how we transition between each location's instrumental style, all within the same track. Then we'll go into more detail on how we created the in-game voices, how the characters converse, and how all those systems work together to create the background ambience as well.
Hey guys, Phil here. I'm going to give you a deep dive into the dynamic map music in Tavern Keeper. So the map music has 7 variations of tracks that could be played depending on which area you're in the map. So we started off by writing an upbeat track with all the melody parts being played on piano before we moved on to other layers, as you can hear here. The track also needed to loop perfectly as well. When we were happy with the initial melody and structure, we moved on to adding different instruments for each variation. Now, in-game, we gave these races specific instruments that we thought suited the race. For example, we wanted the humans to be quite organic sounding, so we used acoustic guitars, real whistling, and some wind instruments. For the halfling variation, the Halflington level is a beautiful setting, so we tried to use some quite pretty sounding instruments, so we ended up using a lot of violin, but it also felt quite folky to us, so we used some mandolins and accordions as well. The Elven level is another pretty looking level, so for this we used a lot of bansuri, which is a bit like a flute, this along with some harps and pizzicato violin as well. Now, the Dwarfs is set in the mines, so we wanted to use a lot of like hard-hitting drums, this along with some trumpets and other horns. Now, for the Orcs, we also wanted to use a lot of drums, but also with some slightly softer sounding instruments as well. So for the melody, we used a kora, which is a bit like a lute and a harp combined basically, and you can hear it in the main melody here. Now, the city level is a mixture of all the instruments that we've used previously. The idea was that all the races have come together and are playing their own instruments in harmony with each other. We've also added some big bells to give that city feel, basically.
Hi, I'm Gabe. Let's go back to the map and we can see how it all works in context. You can see that we've highlighted the regional borders on the map, and that's where the music really changes. When you cross one of these borders, that's when that area music kicks in. And then in the background, we've got a clip of the Wise game object profiler to show the audio listener moving around alongside the camera. And we set up a few ambience nodes to blend between each of the region's instrumentation.
Now let's dive into some of the specific instruments for some of the different layers. Within the percussion, we have a few things in play here, with the shakers, the bongos, and the cajon making a real solid rhythm track. This, along with the bass, gives a real solid foundation and allows for enough space for the other instruments to play in over the top. Now I'm just going to zone into some of the guitar tracks which we played in for the human race. We've got a few guitars here. One of them is just a chug that's going all the way through. We've got some left-right guitar parts, which is basically just the same guitar recorded, but one is panned to the left and one's panned to the right. And then you can hear this chug going all the way through. And then there's a little solo part going over the top. Here's another example of some real instruments that we've played in. We've got a mandolin here, which was used for the halfling race. There's another left-right rhythm panning, and then a little lead line here as well. Now here's what it sounds like when the rest of the halfling instruments are added.
So with the emotes and the voices in game, we wanted to get across the idea that everyone's talking and having normal conversations, but obviously we couldn't use an actual language. So we went with phonetics to try and keep it as abstract as possible. So we had 6 different emotional states, 5 different races in game, the different genders, and we made sure that each phonetic and emotional state had at least 3 variants as well, so you wouldn't hear repeats when they're talking. Overall, we've probably had just under 5,000 separate audio files, so there's a lot of talking, a lot of me going wah, and other such silly sounds. And Gabe's going to talk you through how we went about implementing those.
We've set up the Wise project so that each and every emote can be played from just the one single Wise event. And it's the values in-game that drive and affect which sound is actually played. So the gender, race, and the emotional state of that specific patron. Another challenge we faced that coincided with the emotes was how to create a walla, a background murmur sound that would fill out the tavern, make it sound busier, make it sound more vibrant. The problem was, how do we get these emotes to trigger in a way that accurately represents the actual population that's in the tavern at that moment? For example, it would be really silly to hear orcs if there were no orcs in your tavern. So we have these 3 different blend tracks for a positive, a negative, and a neutral emotional state of the tavern. If you're not doing very well, you probably hear the angry state, but if you're running a lovely tavern and everyone's happy, then you hear the happy blend. And each of these blend tracks consist of 3 different random containers for every gender of every race. And in each of those random containers, there's a varied example of some of the emotes that we made. The blend tracks trigger, so a random piece of audio within the container is fired off at a rate that we control. It's randomized as well, but we've set up a real-time parameter control, or RTPC graph, that affects the trigger rate relative to the number of each race in the tavern. So it looks like a straight line at first, but if we zoom in a little, we can see that it starts curving up near a 0 on the x-axis, which is where we've got the number of the specific race and the gender, and then on the y-axis, we've got the duration at which the random containers trigger. And as we slide the control over to the right, so we're increasing the population, the duration decreases, and so the containers trigger at a faster rate, essentially adding more voice.
Thank you so much for checking out our deep dive on the audio of Tavern Keeper. Just a big shout out and thanks to Greenheart Games for all the support and all the ambition and ideas they gave us, especially working with Chad and all the audio side of things with Wise. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we can't wait to see people play it, and we hope you enjoy the game.